A sentiment I've been hearing a lot lately is that in Monster Hunter Wilds, there's nothing to do. Objectively, this is false, but I also do feel that way. What is the root cause of this boredom? Is it too much playtime, ridiculously high expectations, or is there a fundamental problem with Wilds that needs to be addressed? First and foremost, let me give you the baseline for where I'm at in Wilds so you can better understand where I'm coming from. The game has been out for nearing a month and a half now, and I have 170 hours of in-game time as of recording. On top of this, I also have every single achievement unlocked. For 99% of games out there, if you told someone there's nothing to do in the game, I only have 170 hours of playtime, you would be called an absolute knob. But Monster Hunter is different in that players do go on to put in hundreds of hours quite commonly, with other active players dumping thousands like it's nothing. And don't get me wrong, playtime versus money spent isn't always a great metric to judge how good a game is. A prime example of this would be God of War Ragnarok, which I played around New Year's and bought for around £50. In just under 50 hours I 100% completed the game. There's no reason to go back unless I wanted to re-experience the story. I'm very convinced I'm done with the game, but it's also one of the best games I've played in the past 5 years. Likewise, this might be a bit of a curveball for you all, but my favourite game of all time is actually Counter-Strike. Back in the day I got CSGO for like £2 on a Steam sale, and here today it's actually a free to play game, yet I'm almost 3,000 hours deep. Point being, time played versus dollar spent isn't always a golden standard for criticism. This method of valuing a game might work for some of you, which is fine, however we won't be entertaining that in this video for argument's sake. That would also make this a very short video. What we can compare Wilds to is other Monster Hunter games. Clarify, though it's not fair to compare Title Update 1 Wilds to the finished product of Monster Hunter World Iceborne. What is fair and what we instead need to look at is why you aren't subscribed. But also, we need to look at where World and Rise were at the exact same period of the game's life cycles. A lot of the time in comment sections and in discussions online, I see people comparing Wilds to the finished product that was Monster Hunter World Iceborne that had a bunch of title updates on top of the title updates that came in base game. Naturally, instead, we're going to look at Rise and World's base game launch and what happened with the first ever title updates for those respective games. To start, let's focus on the monster counts, as people claim the Wilds roster to be too small, and at the end of the day we do spend majority of the playtime fighting these things, so it's a good starting point to determine how much content each game had. At launch, base game Rise had 37 large monsters in the game. Meanwhile, Wilds only had 29. Now that looks really bad. However, despite people loving to defend World only had 30 at launch. Title Update 1 for Rise then added Order for these guys, and even secretly threw in Basil to surprise players. In Wilds, on the other hand, we only got high rank Zolshia, which many players felt was supposed to be in base game anyway, and we got Mizusune. Again, doesn't look great for Wilds, but do you know what was added in World's first title update? Literally just the pickle. Okay, but surely that update also added a bunch of other stuff to engage with and farm to compensate, right? No, just the Dragon Mantle. So, funnily enough, Rise, the game objectively not finished at launch due to the pandemic, had more monsters to fight at launch and doubled down with a whole bunch in Title Update 1. For reference, Rise added the same amount of monsters in TU1 as all 5 title updates introduced in base game World combined. Admittedly, quantity doesn't necessarily beat out quality. Just because a game has more monsters than another doesn't mean there's more to do. However, a lot of the arguments I've seen in my own comment sections were purely based on number of monsters. So just note, World and Wilds are pretty much tied right now. Except, they're actually not. In World you didn't have anything to do other than fight the current roster, with Tempered being the only differing factor. In Wilds we at least have 5-star Tempereds, which make up for a longer, harder hitting fight. And while we'll be getting Arc Tempered Raid out in just a couple weeks, World didn't get 80 monsters until Title Update 3. And in terms of grindable endgame systems, in World you had Decos, but bear in mind there wasn't level 4 Decos until Iceborne, same to what it's like in Worlds right now, which while they may have taken longer to farm out in World, it was the exact same thing we currently have, but with less options and less diversity of decorations to obtain. You also had the ability to augment weapons. Boringly, this was one-time upgrades to increase a weapon's attack, affinity element, etc. Whereas of course in Wilds, while people might not like them, we'd have arcane weapons, which are straight up a whole different system of customizable weapons, with an RNG mechanic allowing players to obtain up to 5 upgrades. During Title Update 1 of World, it had no siege type quests, no quote unquote hard content, no major endgame systems, and a similar sized monster pool. This is all simply objective truth. World currently remains my favourite Monster Hunter game in this series until we see the final product that is Wilds. Only then would I be able to make full judgment of if I think Wilds is better. But bluntly speaking, we can't compare Wilds to World and act as though it's comparatively in a worse state. You might then bring up performance and network issues, that's the next point of contention, but do note World and Iceborne both had rough launches with optimization issues, save file problems, and connectivity challenges. While it's still not acceptable for Wilds to have the issues it does, this unfortunately isn't anything new. Anyway, let's go back to the main topic. All of this does raise a blaring point. If Wilds is in such a comparably similar, if not better state than World was in the same time frame, why are players such as myself so bored at the moment? One thing the Monster Hunter series suffers from in the marketing cycle is regression. With the launch of each new title, we leave behind a game fully fleshed out with major updates, an expansion, and then even more major updates. And what do we move on to? Well, base game. It's back to basics like a server wipe in Rust. No endgame, no grind, no fatalis, just us on a beach with a rock. This transition is absolutely jarring. I'd wager a lot of my new subscribers who tried playing Iceborne as their first introduction to the franchise leading up to Wilds were probably super taken back by how little there was to do in Wilds, not knowing the context and history as to why. I mean, even for myself, naturally I was really done and just bored with Iceborne leading up to February 28th. Looking back at it, I really did forget just how much stuff is in that game. This sort of came up earlier, but I do feel as though we need to touch on the D word. Bro, it's difficulty. There is, and of course always will be, a level of subjectivity here. But what I found from my comment sections, other videos, live stream chats, is that when most players say the game is too easy, what they instead mean is that the quest ends too soon. If we look at things in terms of complexity of movesets, I would argue Wilds beats base World in my opinion. You might get hit less in Wilds than previous games, but that's largely due to more fine-tuned hitboxes. But let's be honest, if you went back to play through World right now, how many of your deaths would come due to a monster running at you with an invisible wall attached to it? And again, to reiterate earlier points, the previous 5th gen titles didn't add any quote-unquote hard content until much later title updates. Difficulty in games in general, not just Monster Hunter, is always a tricky balance to get right. How high do you make an enemy's HP pool before it feels like a sponge? How hard does it hit before it becomes artificially difficult? How much leeway does the player get with iframes without them becoming unhittable? It does appear that Capcom are taking player feedback into account with recent updates to Tempered Quests, Zelshia, and incoming Arc Tempered Quests. Even if I was able to definitively conclude Wilds is not easier than World or Rise, it doesn't really matter because the majority of players feel that it is. And if the majority of the player base feels that way, the core game at a fundamental level becomes boring. Why would you waste time fighting stuff with your eyes closed when you can go back a game or two and get your ass kicked? Everything discussed so far simply does happen every single time a new title is released. Point for point, we take every criticism of Wilds and look back at players uttering the exact same sentiments at Rise in 2021. With that being said, is this boredom stemming from a vocal minority of entitled children? I would hope not, because I am one of the players in question. I think rather there's a difference. We have players like me and you who love Wilds, enjoyed it a bunch so far with hundreds of hours invested, and as a regular human being, we just need a little time away after a heavy initial grind. It's completely normal to get bored of games. This is just what happens. But you then also have the latter who place unreachable expectations on their favourite game, and while it derives from a place of passion and love of the series, it's unhealthy and comes across as pure negative. I'm not shy to criticise Wilds by any means. While I've been slacking on live streaming recently, me and my community discuss these issues quite often whenever I'm live. But there's a difference in putting forward a constructive criticism, calling a video game boring because you only played for 200 hours before running out of things to do. These people need to grow up. If you reach the decision that you don't like Wilds for numerous factors after investing significant time into it, that's completely fine. Reaching the conclusion there's nothing to do in Wilds, however, is dumb. I wanted to talk about this here today as I am a bit bored of Monster Hunter right now. Title Update 1, while it was a great update, it wasn't enough to fully reignite my excitement and urge to dive back in fully. To be honest, I've started looking at other games I can cover here on the channel. This has always been the plan, and there's a few upcoming titles such as Night Rain that I feel are a great match for my audience. I have no one else but myself to blame for investing too many hours in such a short period of time, though I don't regret it. This is the way it goes for me. The game comes out, I grind everything there is to do, and I walk away. Sometimes I walk away forever, other times like with Monster Hunter, Whenever there's a new update, I'll boot it up and check it out. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. And thanks again for 10,000 subscribers. Thanks for watching.